What is up, my planting people? My name is Lithius and welcome to Roots Ready. In today's video, I am going to be giving you some tips on things you can do to keep your plants nice and happy when you go away on a short vacation. By short vacation, I'm talking about a week to about 10 days. Anything longer than that, and you might need to call in help from friends or family to come in and just give your plants a watering and once over to check on them to see if they're doing okay. So this video is not for anyone who is going to be going backpacking for 6 months. Your plants will not make it unless it is the toughest cactus out there. But for everyone else who's just going away just for a short period, these are the things that you can do to make sure that your plants are as happy as they can be. Make sure you stay till the end of the video, because as much as I tried to ensure that none of my plants missed me too much, on my return, some of them did look a little bit worse for wear, and I'm going to be showing you those at the end of the video. So definitely stay tuned for that. So I'm going to kick this video off with a caveat to say that everything I'm going to be telling you here today is based on my environment, in my settings, with my plants. Now, just to give you a bit of a background on what I'm working with, temperature averages at around 20 degrees Celsius. My humidity averages out at around 60%. To be fair, I've got higher humidity in some parts of my house compared to others, so that's something else that you might need to consider when you're caring for your plants. And my lighting, I have an east window, which I get a lot of morning light, so that's dappled, bright but not as harsh. Light coming in from this window over here, and at the front of my house I've got a west facing window that gets a lot brighter, a lot hotter afternoon sun. So that's what I'm working with, and that's how I sort of judge what I do. So the first thing you want to do is wait as late as possible without the risk of missing your flight or however means of transportation to get to your destination. What you want to do is water your plants as close to that time as possible. What I did is I went around and I gave all of my plants a really good drink. I'm working with a lot of aeroids at the moment. A lot of those are on a regular watering routine. So I just went ahead and gave them all a good drink. My succulents I usually tend to water maybe once a month in the winter season, and in the growing season I tend to water it maybe once every 2 weeks. But what I did in this situation is actually went ahead and gave them just a little bit of water, because we're only just entering spring. They're just about getting out of their dormancy, so just give them a little bit of water just in case there is a freak heat wave that hits the UK when I'm away. So I just wanted to do that so they have a little bit reserved in their tank for later. An easy mistake to do is actually miss one of your plants. And a lot of us, we have more than one plant in our collection, and it can be very easy just to sort of assume that you've watered a plant when actually you haven't. And if you're going away for 10 days, 2 weeks, you're talking about a long time that your plant has gone without any water. So you want to make sure that you do get every single one of those. So once you've watered your plants, the next couple of steps to follow really is about just making sure that your plant doesn't dry up when you're away. One of the things I do is I pull my plants just a little bit away from the window. Some of them can stay up against it, for example, like my succulents and those that are a little bit more hardy. But for everything else that's a little bit more sensitive, I pull it away from the window. When I do that, I try to huddle them up into a small group. So what that does is that creates a microclimate, and that actually allows the plants to sort of create their own humidity and keep them in an environment that is less likely to dry out. Bear in mind that if you do this, there is a risk that there is a chance that there could be a pest outbreak that could then affect all of those plants in that huddle. Another tip that I would offer is reducing the amount of light that your plant gets. You'll be doing this just by virtue of moving your plants away from the window. But if you are also working with grow lights, you can also consider lowering the power, the wattage, or reducing the amount of hours that your lights are on. Not by too much, which can actually put your plants into shock and making them think that it's a different type of season than it's not. But just reduce it slowly. What you can do is actually in the days leading up to your vacation is start to reduce that light ever so slightly, maybe by half an hour or by hour, and try to get that down to about maybe 6 hours if you're working with grow lights. But you want to also make sure that your plants are indeed getting some light, because they won't survive without any light. My thinking behind this is that plants do go into overdrive when there is a lot of light out, a lot of sun. That's when they're photosynthesizing, so they are using a lot more energy, which means that they are using a lot more water. And that could mean that if the lights are on for 12 hours or more, your plant is really going through those reserves. So what you want to do is just make sure that they do that to a point where they're going to survive and they're going to be fine, but not to a point where they're overdoing it per se. One other thing that you want to consider is the temperature of your space. This is something that I learned the hard way because I left a window open, and one of the plants in this room actually suffered a little bit due to some cold damage, I imagine. Most of the plants that we're working with usually like it at a comfortable room temperature. So I'm aiming for about maybe 20 to 22 degrees Celsius. You definitely don't want to go any lower than that, because that is, for a lot of our plants, that is a little bit too cold and too uncomfortable for them, and could again put them in a bit of shock. And you don't want to go too crazy with the temperature, hitting that sort of 30 Celsius sort of temperature, that real tropical vibe, because again, that's just only going to help evaporate that moisture from the soil, from the leaves, and that could mean that you end up with some really crispy edges on your leaves, or a really damaged root system. Now you'll see that in all of the tips that I've just given you in this video, that is all about managing the water level and the moisture level in your soil, in the leaves as well, because it's all about how much water that they have. Because for most of us, what's going to damage our plants is the lack of water for that long period of time. What you don't want to do for sure is overwater your plants at the start and you come back to plants that have died from root rot, because most of the time you can save a plant that is a little bit dehydrated, and it's much harder to save a plant that has root rot unless you're talking about propagating it and starting all over again, which is a whole different ball game and a whole other topic for a whole other video. So as I said at the start of this video, the majority of my plants actually fared very well. A lot of them have put out a lot of new growth. You can see right here, this monstera is still pushing out this leaf, and most of them are doing really well, but there are a few that didn't do so well, and I'll try to sort of tell you why I think they didn't do so well, but it happens. Yeah, you just never know. These plants, they're living things, and life happens, I guess. So I'm going to walk through my collection and just point out a couple of plants that didn't do so well. So we start off with this Gloriosum right here, the only one in my collection. You can see that it has some yellow spots on its leaf, and the other leaves, they've got a bit of a black tip going on over there. This one also has some yellowing dots. This leaf around the back here, this died actually. This fell off just before I left for holiday, and that was a result of repotting this plant. The reason why I feel like this plant didn't fare so well is because this room is quite cold and the window was left open. So I think this is a bit of cold damage to these leaves, but hopefully it sort of stops there. I'm on it now, so I'm just going to keep an eye on the temperature just to make sure that it doesn't get too cold for these plants. And with spring so close and around the corner, I need some new bigger leaves on this one. This is my Anthurium magnificum cross regal. This is the cutting from the chunk. This main leaf that has been with me for a little while now is crisped up and is on its way out, which is such a shame. I'm not sure why this plant crisped up. I did check, there's water in there. I'm not sure if it's a result of this new leaf coming out, which resulted in this one being, just the plant saying, I don't need you anymore. I'm not sure, which is a real shame. And me being really clumsy, this leaf was pristine and beautiful, and I went and touched it and poked a couple of holes in there. So that is definitely my fault. So yeah, this is another one that didn't fare too well whilst I was away. Here is my Anthurium forgetii, and for the most part this plant is doing really well, apart from these leaves over here. So this is, I think this is the oldest leaf on the plant, and this is another one that shipped with the plant. So here's again quite old, but since I left, this plant I find is a little bit thirsty, and I ran out of water before I got back and decided to eject these two bottom leaves. So I'm going to chop those off when I get a moment, give it a good drink of water, and hopefully it should do just fine. It's got two inflorescence up here as well, so that could be another reason why, because the plant is diverting a lot of that energy to keep those two inflorescence alive, and that's my speculation. But apart from that, it's doing really, really well. Over here is my beautiful philodendron micans, and I've got a couple of propagations that I cut off this main stem and potted it back into this pot of pond. Unfortunately, some of those propagations are yellowing and we're losing some of those leaves. So my thinking is the reason for this is that the pond started to dry out, especially at the top of the pot, which tends to dry out first. And because I wasn't here to keep on top of it and to give it just a little bit of a misting just to keep it moist, some of those leaves are dying. The stems are still okay, so there's still hope that it could push out some new growth and some roots. But unfortunately, it looks like we've lost those leaves over there. So this is my Hoya meredithii, and unfortunately, I'm so sad. I came back home to find this little black dot appearing, and it's not for a lack of water. There's definitely some water in its reservoir, but it has unfortunately started to lose this large main leaf that it arrived with. Luckily, it pushed out this tiny little baby leaf a couple of months ago. Hasn't done anything since. No, tell a lie. It had it just there, just in that main little stem over there. If I can zoom in. Oh, there we go. There were two baby leaves that were emerging, but unfortunately, they dried up and dropped off, which is really, really sad. So this is what I'm working with now. This whole plant depends on this one leaf. So I'm hoping that it hangs in there and can continue to grow strong for me, but we'll see how we get on with that. And finally, this philodendron atabuense is actually losing this leaf. Again, this is one of the older leaves that this plant arrived with, and it is now brown and crispy, and I'm gonna have to cut it off very, very soon. Although I'm not too sure if this is just from me being away, because the only other leaf that this plant has put out, which is this one over here, came out really deformed, really small, and it just doesn't look very happy with me. But I can see some new growth in there. There you go. So hopefully it starts to behave itself really, and starts to produce leaves as normal. So there we have it, my top tips for keeping your plants happy when you go away on a short trip. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do send me a little fingers crossed emojis in the comments area below for all of the plants that I just showed you that didn't fare so well. I think they'll be absolutely fine, but just in case, all of the support really, really helps me to get through this little transition period. But that was it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep planting. A lot of light out, a lot of sun, so that's when they're most active, when they're photosynthetic, when they're